Welcome back to another episode of the Lifestyle Practice Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Derek Williams, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit differently. We love hearing from our audience. We get emails with a range of questions or requests. I recently had an interaction with a dentist that was quite eye-opening. It was a tough situation, and I'm not going to tell you their name because of that. I'll keep it anonymous, but I'll try and share some of the details that I learned because I think it will allow for some really good learning opportunities for those of you that are maybe already in practice ownership or are looking forward to that. So before I kind of get into things, I'll just read through the information that I received, and then I'll go back through things and kind of talk through what were some of the mistakes, what are things that could have been done differently. And my point here is not to dog on anyone. We all make mistakes, and you just have to learn from them. But I think it's really beneficial if we can learn from other people's mistakes instead of having to make them on our own. And so that's part of my intention here, is to be able to share some of these things so that for those of you that are, potentially going through this, you can kind of learn from listening instead of having to go through it yourself. The email that I received, here's some of the information from it. Hey, Derek, I bought this practice 4 months ago, and the practice transition has been a nightmare. My team, one assistant and one hygienist left, and I'm essentially on my own. Just me and my front desk. I'm very stressed out financially and emotionally drained. I've always considered going through TLP coaching after listening to the podcast. I took TLP Academy when I first graduated. I was planning on starting coaching 6 months after ownership, after insurance credentialing, getting my software, equipment in place, certain systems, and a feel for the staff and patients. Collections went from $100,000 a month to about $40,000 a month. I'm going in the red every month by $7,000. My assistant left 2 months into ownership. My hygienist left a couple days ago. Everything is breaking. Patients are upset. I was too stressed and really shut down, so I haven't been leading my team and letting too many things slide. So I started out by just trying to kind of gather more information. So the question that I asked is, what were the things that you saw in the practice initially that made you excited about this as an opportunity, that led you to say, okay, yeah, this is the one. I'm going to purchase this. And this was the response. I was looking for an office with room for a CBCT. I wanted plenty of parking, wider operatories for sedation patients with wheelchairs. Ideal practice is a space where I can grow and bring on an associate. This office is about 3,000 square feet. The practice schedule was very light, low patient numbers, but collections were great, partly because they used custom codes as far as insurance billing. Heavy Botox clinic because the owner doctor was a Botox instructor. Previous owner was also a COIS graduate, so the team and patients are familiar with quality dentistry. So that's the information that I had. And when I first read it, my heart kind of sunk because I have seen some situations like this, and it's a very, very, very uphill battle, very difficult to turn things around when the momentum has been going downhill so rapidly and so strongly. So I'm going to go back and kind of critique. And again, not trying to be critical, and I don't want any of you to think, oh man, Derek's critical of everyone he comes in contact with. We can learn from everything, right? And so can this person. And I hopefully provided some feedback, and I'll share at the end kind of what I shared. But let me kind of go through and share some of my immediate thoughts. First of all, when he shares that the assistant and hygienist both left, and talks about everything breaking, patients are upset, too stressed and shut down, so I haven't been leading my team. The very first thought that I think is, it's very likely that this was a case of overconfidence or underestimating the challenges that were there. It makes me wonder what type of communication has gone on, what type of leadership. It's probably been non-existent or not, sufficient, to say the least. If anytime you're in a situation where you're not having good outcomes with patients and staff are leaving, those are usually some big red flags that there are some issues, big issues with how things are being carried on. It could be clinically, but most likely the biggest thing is communication. talking things through with your staff, being able to troubleshoot, work things out together. It doesn't mean that you have to have all the answers, but it means that you need to be able to talk things through. You need to be able to kind of take responsibility and talk to your staff about things that don't go well and help them feel confident that you're going to continue to kind of work through things together. The next thing that I think, dang, we just kind of missed the mark is, they took TLP Academy and they were planning on coaching 6 months after ownership, after kind of like all of this minutia. And this is something that I hear relatively frequently, and I get it. There is a lot of minutia. There is a lot of things switching over accounts into your name. There's paperwork with insurance credentialing. There's a lot of stuff that you kind of feel like, is it really worth it to get coaching right now when I have to be spending so much of my time on, some of this other stuff? And yeah, like I said, I get it. But at the same time, here we are 4 months in, and we're losing money every single month. This is very, very big issues that are in place. And like I said, very tough to correct at this point. I think I have never, as far as I can remember, I have never heard a client say, I wish that I would have waited a little bit longer before coaching. But I've heard many times, man, why didn't I start this earlier? I thought that I needed to have this in place and this in place, but now I look back and I think, man, if you would have been there helping me and we would have been able to work through this, I would have been able to avoid this issue and this obstacle, and I would have hit the ground running at a much faster pace. So, of course, it's up to you, but you've probably heard Steve and Matt and I talk relatively frequently about, the ideal timeline. If you're looking to purchase a practice, try and reach out to us. Give us a little bit of context. Tell us where you're at. When you're ready to make an offer on a practice, just send us an email with maybe a practice assessment and say, hey, Derek, I'm interested in working together with you in coaching. This is the practice that I'm making an offer on. Do you think you could do a quick read through and see if you see any, red flags or anything? Happy to respond in that situation. Once you get an LOI in place, then we can start the engagement process as far as working together in coaching. You make the first payment, and then we put things on pause until closing. And then at that point, that kind of is a good middle of the road where you don't have to spend a ton of money. And if things fall through, then you don't have to worry about it. We just start over from scratch later. But by talking through some of these points and preparing for things, a lot of times we're talking about, what is it like meeting the staff for the first time? What types of questions are you going to get from the staff? How do you respond? What are the first 2 weeks going to be like? What are the most important things to focus on with your patient interactions and leading staff? How do we choose what changes to make and which ones to kind of put on the back burner? All of those things are incredibly important, because if you go in and do those out of order or focus on some of the wrong things, it can lead to some negative outcomes and results. And in the beginning, it is so important to get some good wins under your belt to increase your confidence in yourself, patients' confidence in you, and your staff's confidence in your abilities as well. There is nothing better than starting off with some really good wins. So very, very important. Of course, it's up to everyone when you want to start coaching, and everybody's situation is different. But by and large, like I said, I kind of already told you the trend that I'm seeing. The next part, when I asked, okay, what did you see in this practice in the beginning? How did you do the evaluation? How are you looking for opportunities? That helps me kind of get an idea, what was the practice doing before, how we may have gotten ourselves in this situation. So looking for an office with room for a CBCT, plenty of parking, wider operatories. These are not the things that you want to be looking for in an acquisition. They're completely the wrong criteria to make a judgment call on, a good practice opportunity. Steve and I did a mini series on purchasing a practice. It was episodes 41 through 45. It was a couple years ago, but that information in there is very, very valuable. And I promise you, none of those episodes did we talk about having criteria for wide operatories, lots of parking, and room for a cone beam. Those might be some good, pluses, some good side benefits in a practice opportunity, but that is not the main criteria that you should be looking for. And the second part of this, I wanted a big practice where I could bring on an associate. This is a good example of putting the cart before the horse. Look, I get that we all want to be a multi-doctor practice owner or multi-practice owner, but you got to just focus on the first step first. Focus on finding a good practice where there's healthy cash flow, where you see a lot of upside, where you can kind of come in, make a few changes, and you think that you should be able to like really kind of increase and grow. Not always the case. I've recognized that, as I've talked to a lot of doctors, that doctors have called it kind of like the TLP acquisition, where there's kind of this sweet spot between, 500,000 and $1 million in collections, healthy profit margins, and then a lot of opportunity to make changes and to put things in place. And by and large, I would say that's probably is most of the clients that we deal with. But at the same time, I've had plenty of clients that purchase a practice that's maybe doing like 1.5 or something like that. And there's healthy profit margins. And the goal is really just, hey, help me maintain where this is at. I'm much more comfortable buying something that's already doing well and maintaining it rather than having to like grow into it. That's what you want to be looking for. So, when we see the practice schedule was very light, low patient numbers. They're, using custom insurance codes to kind of maximize billing. Heavy Botox clinic, previous owner is a Coice graduate. These are all things that are kind of pointing to the fact that this practice is getting the most juice out of the squeeze as possible. So when you kind of look at this, you're going to have to kind of evaluate it and think, if I go into this, I'm going to have to be like at the top of my game just to maintain. There's not a lot of room for growth where I can go in and pull all these different levers to try and grow. So like I said, tough situation. I mean, all of this information is kind of water under the bridge at this point. My biggest impression was that this dentist did not understand the gravity of this situation. In my response, I said, I haven't seen a drastic decrease like this. Some of those cases have ended in bankruptcy. And the dentist responded and said, I was really surprised. Why would you say bankruptcy? You're 4 months consistently losing money with production less than half of where it was. And like I talked about, like you have to kind of think of this as like you're steering a ship. It's a very big, heavy, massive ship. And you've let it kind of steer off course, and to course correct is not simple and is not easy. It takes a lot. It takes all of your effort and energy to try and get it back on track. Very, very challenging. And a lot of the time it's, it can be a challenge that may not be able to be overcome. So my response to this dentist was, look, you kind of need to wake up. You need to realize how dire the situation is. You need to take ownership and responsibility. You've got to kind of, like I said, you kind of got to wake up and understand how serious this is and really try and put some drastic measures in place. It's a tough situation as well because, they're in a position where they're basically, the cash flow is non-existent. So to bring on a coach at this point is much more difficult than it would have been at the very beginning when you have you start out with maybe some working capital, you've got some time. Very tough at this point to try and backtrack because you can't. You just have to start where you're at. So my opinion is, basically, this dentist saw where they were at. They knew that it wasn't good, but they still kind of felt like, okay, yeah, I probably need to make some changes. This is stressful, getting out of hand. No, this is dire. Like this is do or die at this point. So again, I don't want this to come off as scary. This is maybe one in a few hundred as far as, an outcome being as serious as this. And I know what it's like to be in that position. When you're at the beginning and you're looking at practices, you're evaluating, it's really tough to know, like, where am I going to fall as far as a leader? as far as, being able to increase production and communicate with patients. This whole idea of getting into ownership is really challenging to kind of know where are you going to fall on the spectrum, and you just can't know until you actually get there. So, but there are certain things that you can do to put in place before then. Number one, know what you're looking for in a practice. You've got to go through multiple practices, see what the pros and cons are in each of these situations. You've got to know your criteria. In this situation, the criteria were backwards, focusing on the wrong things. And then thirdly, the last point, get experts in your corner sooner rather than later. Again, like I said, I've never heard anyone say, oh, I think I pulled somebody in too early and got expert advice when I probably didn't need it yet. It's almost always the opposite. And that's true here. It's a little bit too late at this point. And it's much more difficult when the cash flow is not there. So again, if you find yourself having questions, go back and listen to episodes 41 through 45 that Steve and I did. Feel free to reach out and ask questions. We're always happy to go through things. And again, to put things in perspective, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but by and large, dentists are a successful model. Banks are very willing to lend. Acquisitions are very, very safe, much more safe than startups as far as the default rate on loans. So do your homework, have healthy optimism and healthy skepticism as you move forward, and keep your vision high, but keep that action high also to match it. I talked about this recently in an episode with Dr. Tegan Willis, where we've got to find this level and realize which is our barrier. Is our vision low and our actions are higher, or is our actions higher? Or are our actions the rate limiting step, the barrier, the ceiling for us, and our vision is high? They've got to both be kind of matching each other, or we have to at least have an accurate idea of which one is limiting us and where do we need help. So I know this is maybe a tougher episode to listen to, but there's really good things that we can learn here from other people's mistakes. And I wish nothing but the best for this dentist. So as I shared in the beginning, my response to this dentist was, look, you need to take things seriously. This is more dire than you realize. I wish you the best of luck. I'm not sure exactly the best route to go at this point, but you've got to focus on, some of the serious changes that you can make to really get things in place. So take care, everyone. Feel free to reach out to any of us, Matt, Steve, or Derek at thelifestylepractice.com, and we will talk to you next time.